Travesty is almost over, and the big guy is getting the last rambling word on his failed presidency. Joe Biden conducting his final exit interview with friendly MSNBC host Lawrence O'Donnell, and he sounded as bitter as ever, full of grievance and self-pity. For example, Joe Biden regrets not slapping his name on stimulus checks like Trump did.
Ironically, I almost spent too much time on the policy, not enough time on the politics. Democratic Senator Commerce saying, well, you know, Joe Biden did this, and this is done by so-and-so and so-and-so, and this is the new, you know, built by the Democratic Party kind of thing. I really am concerned about how fragile democracy is. That sounds corny, but I mean, I really am concerned because you've heard me say it 100 times. I really think we're at an inflection point in history here. We're unrelated to any particular leader. Things are going to change drastically.
Let's hope so. And the outgoing president, who will be best remembered for sky-high inflation and a weak economy, is now trying to pass the blame for his economic woes onto the red states.
I got a lot of criticism, understandably. We've invested more in red states than blue states.
That's in this book. That's in this report.
Well, for two reasons. One, red states really screwed up in terms of the way they handle their economy and the way they handle manufacturing, the way they handle access to supply chains.
And earlier, Joe Biden spoke for the final time in public as president, delivering remarks at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And as usual, he was a wordsmith.
I announced the next phase, the next 15 drugs subject to negotiations. Drugs that will treat cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and so much more, including Ozempic. Hard to say. But it really is an incredible drug.
The first question, is Ozempic an incredible drug, Greg?
Well, I don't know what drug he's on or what drug he's stopped, but it's not funny anymore. I mean, that is just bizarro. Yeah. I was watching Biden and O'Donnell, and it's like watching two punch-drunk hobos playing Go Fish. They're the only two people on Earth who can actually understand each other. You know, you really get me. Meanwhile, everybody else watching thinks, how did they get the two old guys from the Muppets back together? I thought they were dead. It is funny watching MSNBC give Joe Biden his exit interview. It's kind of like the Titanic interviewing the iceberg. They both went hand in hand down the drain. One of the most common things liberals say, we need to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation. Apparently, that's their version of a conversation. In order to have one, it has to be someone as dumb as you. That is why whenever you prove them wrong, they go, well, we need to have a conversation. But there's no point at all in arguing over Biden's idea of what he did or said. It's like arguing with a child while they're trying to recite a dream they had the night before. You know, I was flying on a dragon and Uncle Bob was there and giant spiders were eating snow cones. You don't sit there and go, I'm not sure about the snow cones. Joe Biden, when he talks, is like a kid describing a dream. His last 4 years were nothing but an acid trip. Now you got the New York Times, saying top Democrats were trying to get Joe out, Chuck Schumer and everybody. This underlines the severity of the cover-up. The only reason they freaked out isn't because Joe was a feeble mess. It's because America saw the feeble mess in the debate. Their cover-up was blown, and we have to pursue that.
Okay. You know, Jesse, the whole speech was not a vision, of America and for America. You know, the analogy, the city on the hill, it was dark. It was full of grievance. It was negative. He's really concerned about this inflection point in history and the fragility of democracy.
You remember we went down the shore and we all played Hungry, Hungry Hippos?
Yes.
And you won?
I won.
It reminds me of, he just wants all the credit. And he's just gobbling up as much credit as possible. He was compared to FDR. Now, if FDR had the opportunity to do an exit interview, unfortunately he didn't, he died in office, but he did. Would he be saying, oh, woulda, coulda, shoulda, I should have named more bridges and put my name on more checks? No, that's not what great presidents do. That's not what well-adjusted human beings do. And he's saying, a lifelong politician, that he wasn't political enough. Like, we're supposed to think Joe Biden was this policy wonk that spent all day with engineers inside the Roosevelt room crafting brilliant public policy. No, he didn't. He just spent a lot of money on windmills, and it blew up the economy. And now he's blaming red states. The red states were the only ones doing business when he was sending money out the door because the blue states closed down because of COVID. And he wants people to feel sorry for him. The guy's got his own chef. He's got his own jet. No one feels sorry for him. This Schumer article is incredible. They said the debate which he bombed was a gift because they wanted this to happen, because it put this coup in motion. And he went over to Joe's place in Rehoboth, and the first thing that happened, Joe's on the phone with other Democrats shouting at them, "I'm not going anywhere." So Schumer hands him polling that shows he has a 5% chance of winning. Biden goes, "I've never seen this before." No one even showed it to him.
You know, Harold, Joe Biden came in promising unity. And, you know, he created hatred and division in America by degrading us and calling people who supported Donald Trump extremists and MAGA extremists. And he leaves office blaming Republicans. I mean, isn't he leaving the same way he came in?
No, I think he came in, and I think a lot of people thought he might have been able to bring the country together more. I think about 4 years ago, January 20th, I'll never forget where I was sitting. My family, we were still renting a place in Florida. I had not been vaccinated yet. And I remember listening to President Biden, and I commented on the show, I think Brett was hosting the show, that I felt so good about the country being able to come together. 4 years later, I think he failed in that regard in a lot of ways. I heard him trying to say, and Jesse and Greg, I don't disagree with you. I'm ready for him to move on. This is not a slight at him at all, but I'm ready for the next game and ready for the next phase in American political history and our own history. But I listened to him, and I thought maybe he was trying to say that he didn't. His personal politics over the many years he was in the Senate and vice president was always about trying to reconcile and bring people together. And I think one of the things that people will look back on this presidency and say there were times which we were not together. There were times in which there was division, even within his own party. And I think people will point to what you just pointed to in that article, Jesse, about how Schumer went there and how there were Democrats wanting him to step down. It was time to usher in a new era. He presented himself, Judge, as being a transitional figure, and he was not that. Now, again, I'm ready to stop talking about it. We'll stop talking about it in the next 72 hours. The next president has a great opportunity, a great set of challenges. We know a lot of them, from TikTok to taxes to tariffs to Ukraine, and I'm rooting for him. But the stuff on Biden, I didn't fully understand what he was saying last night on the show. And he's entitled to his due, entitled to his assessment of his presidency. But again, I think I speak for a lot of Democrats and probably a lot more Republicans. It's time to move on.
Thank you, Harold. That was a very reasoned, logical discussion.
I hope
All right,
my wife
Katie.
listened to that.
Katie, you know, the whole thing, the more he speaks, the more he proves that he's cognitively inclined. I mean, he said that Kamala could have beaten Donald Trump. What will he be remembered for?
Well, lots of complaining based on this last interview and the last couple of days that he's been in front of a camera. He says he spent too much time on the policy, not enough time on the politics. Well, that's just not true. I mean, he's basically trying to say that they didn't spend enough time on PR, that the White House press office didn't, spend enough time promoting what they were trying to sell. What they did do is tell Americans things that they were experiencing, like inflation and crime and the border and consequences from that weren't happening. So he was basically saying that he wanted them to do more of that and delusionally thinking that's going to work. In terms of his farewell message to the country, he didn't do this end of the year press conference with multiple reporters. He ran to this very safe space of MSNBC to go and whine rather than address the American people through these reporters and answer questions about what his legacy he wants to be, what he sees for the future. Instead, he's going over old territory that he lost on. And when he talks about democracy being fragile, he's right about that. It is fragile, which is why it is so dangerous what the Democrats did to Donald Trump over the past 8 years, what they did with all the lawfare, what Joe Biden did with his Department of Justice, trying to put his top political opponent in jail, suing to keep Trump off of the ballot, suing to keep RFK Jr. off of ballots. That's not democratic. And they're still thinking that they're the ones who have the moral high ground on that issue when Americans showed in polling before and after the election they trust Trump on the issue of democracy because he was open to a primary, open to debate, open to other people being in the mix and having conversations about different kinds of ideas and putting them into policy. So I don't know what his legacy is going to be. The country has 60% plus have nothing good to say about his approval rating. He did a lot of damage in terms of people's economic situations, and that's going to have to be unraveled by the Trump administration. But based on what he's been saying the last couple of days, I think you'll remember him in the short term for sure as just whining out the door.
Yeah. Yep. Coming up, border accountability is coming in 3 days. Trump's DHS nominee, Kristi Noem, torching Joe Biden and Democrats for letting criminal migrants run wild in America.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.